Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Balabha Girivara Dadi. Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Brajajanaran Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Brajajanaran Yamunatira Vanapchadi Jamunatira Vanachadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. 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 Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Dadi. Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Nandana Brajajanaran. Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Sodanan Brajajanaran. Yamanatira Vanachadi. Natira Vanachadi. Jamunatira Vanachadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayo Vishwapad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavadinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing slowly but steadily through the concluding portion of Uddhava Gita chapter 10. We're all the way up to verse 32. And Krishna is imparting transcendental knowledge to Uddhava. Essentially, leaving no wiggle room, no reasonable approach for fruitive activities. Instead, the alternative, devotional service to him, to Krishna. But something that it's an impetus to help move towards devotional service to Krishna is to understand the futility of fruitive activity. Acting in the modes of nature, trying to be the enjoyer, and all of that. So here's text 32 translation. As long as a living entity thinks that the modes of material nature have separate existences, he will be obliged to take birth in many different forms and will experience varieties of material existence. Therefore, the living entity remains completely dependent on fruitive activities under the modes of nature. So as we've been saying, this is the graduate study of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is his undergraduate and Uddhava is his graduate student. These understandings are not different, not something new. It's just more comprehensive to understand what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, like all living entities, moving and non-moving, are under the material nature. Maya jakshena prakriti soyate sacharacharam. And material nature means the three modes of material nature, because Krishna works through the three modes of material nature. So the three modes of material nature are controlling the living entity's activities. The choices that we make, they're free will choices. However, our free will choices are very strongly influenced by the modes of nature. And until one becomes free from the modes of nature, likely one's choices will be within the modes of nature. And with that comes fruitive activities. That is the expectation that there's going to be enjoyment on the other end of these activities. That's the notion. It doesn't turn out that way, but one obstinately continues doing that, or in a conditioned manner continues doing that, even though the result isn't it doesn't match the expectation. And that's conditional life. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, or translation, excuse me. As long as this, so the Sanskrit is yavat. There's yavat and tavat. As long as this, then that. Yavat, tavat. As long as the living entity remains under the control of the three modes of material nature, then tavat. There's a consequence. He will attain various forms of life, such as demigod, animal, and so on, as long as the living entity remains in the bodily concept of life, thinking himself to be the doer. There's this atmano yavat. Nanatvam atmano yavat. Different states of existence. Nanatvam atmano yavat. Thinking himself the doer, he will have to experience the good and bad results of his karma. The good and bad results. Asad yoni janmasu from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. Sad yoni janmasu. Now, sad can mean eternal and temporary. It can also, depending upon context, mean good and bad results. And in the Sanskrit, it's the last line, paratantriyam. Paratantriyam. That's there's a spiritual paratantriyam and there's a material paratantriyam. The devotees in Vrindavan have paratantrium. They feel themselves exclusively dependent upon Krishna. They feel a sense of possessiveness in their relationship with Krishna. Not like I own Krishna, but there's an intense feeling of Krishna as mine. That is my relationship with Krishna. That's my existence. There's a material possessiveness. And it's not, it's the transformation or transition between material and spiritual. So let's hear Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. While considering himself to be the doer of activities, Kartaham, right? Bhagavad Gita. While considering himself to be the doer of activities, the conditioned soul continues to wander through varieties of material bodies one after another. In such a condition of life, one is incapable of understanding that beyond this temporary manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unless one is situated in his constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Lord. One will remain falsely proud of being the proprietor of all he surveys and the performer of heroic activities. In the human form of life, the conditioned soul may begin to worship 5 demigods for the fulfillment of his material desires. In such a situation, one thinks of the material world, which is a creation of the Lord's external energy, as being an object of his enjoyment. The picture's clear. And the alternative to that conditioned picture is clear. And yet it's, it takes a while to get there. So here's Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss or paraphrase of Vishwanath's commentary. When the living entity, so that's the yavat, when the living entity is forgetful of his relationship with Krishna, tavat, he considers this material world as ultimate reality. Thus he wanders among various species of life, sometimes as a hog, sometimes as a bird, and sometimes as a demigod. Okay, here's the BBT purport and then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's. The word guna vaishamyam indicates forgetfulness of Lord Krishna, which causes one to see material varieties as separate states of existence. Separate states of existence. Where have we heard that before? Separate states of existence. It's in the there's 2 places. There's many. One of the Chaturshloki verses of the Bhagavatam. The Chaturshloki verses are found Canto 2, Chapter 9, verses 30 through 33. And one of them is, one who sees things as having artha, or value or existence, separate from me, Vishnu speaking, separate from the Supreme Lord, know that seeing like that, that's my illusory energy, Maya. So reverse. Persons in Maya see things as having a separate existence. There's objects potentially for fulfilling my desires. That's why there's creation. One of the reasons living entities want to enjoy, here it is. Here's a sandbox, go and play. There's no enjoyment. But it's illusion. It's illusory enjoyment, whatever it is. So, guna vaishamyam, which indicates forgetfulness of Lord Krishna, causes one to see material varieties as separate states of existence. Like good and bad, and happiness and distress, and enjoyable and not enjoyable. Seeing like that is a result of forgetfulness of Krishna. The living entity, being attracted to material varieties and having faith in them, is forced to experience these varieties in different material bodies, such as those of demigods, pigs, businessmen, insects, and so on, according to the karma mimamsa philosophers. Who are the karma mimamsa philosophers? We've heard this before. Now we're going to hear it again kind of extensively in Jiva Goswami's writings. Karma mimamsa philosophy says there's no Ishvara. There's the modes of nature. There's duty, or proper performance of the activity of the living entity. And above the living entity is the laws of karma or dharma, and one is to abide by that. And if you abide by that, you get a good result. And if you don't abide by that, you get a bad result. And you enjoy happiness or distress born of your activities. So the part of that's true in conditioned sense. But, it's an atheistic philosophy. So here we go. According to the karma mimamsa philosophers, there is no transcendental living entity who is the background of all existence. They accept material variety as the final reality. That's it. All there is matter. And the laws that govern matter. It's, similar to modern scientists. However, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the actual basis of everything. Everything is within him, and he is within everything. A pure devotee of the Lord sees Krishna everywhere and sees all of the variegated modes of nature as the potency of Lord Krishna. One who does not see Lord Krishna will certainly see material variegatedness as the supreme reality. Such vision is called Maya, or gross illusion, and is similar to the vision of an animal. Paratantrium, remember the word for word paratantrium is dependence. Dependence. Paratantrium means one will remain caught in the web of fruitive activities unless one gives up this superficial separatist vision. Separate from. So this other place where separatist is used is, one other place, is in Kapila Dev's teachings to Devahuti about devotional service mixed with the modes. And when devotional service is mixed with the mode of ignorance and mixed with the mode of passion, there is a separatist idea. There's still some connection with the Supreme Lord because it's devotional service, but that devotional service is rendered with something of a separatist idea, like who's the enjoyer idea. I'm doing devotional service because I want to enjoy. And, it's not Shuddha. It's still with a degree of separatist mentality. Okay. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, very short. As long as, that's the yavat, the jiva acts with his senses and produces diversity in high or low destinations, tavat, he will attain variety of devata or animal bodies. As long as that variety exists, the jiva remains dependent on karma, like the karma mimamsa philosophers say. Here's Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha. His translation goes like this. As long as there is disturbance of the gunas, there will be variety for the Atma. As long as variety exists, Atma will be dependent on karma. Very short. And his commentary. Variety is negated according to the Advaya Vadi. Advaya, the non-dualist. Shankara, Advaya or Advaita, Shuddha Advaita, Advaitavad. So the Advaitavadi, those who hold the doctrine of non-dual, variety is negated. There is no such thing. The ideas of the Advaitavadi are presented. What's that? There is only one Atma whose Swarup is consciousness and nothing else. By beginningless avidya, it, Brahman, produces Maya made of the gunas, and its effects generated its disturbance in the Atma. Like a dream, it produces many ideas of you and one idea of myself. The identity of I is its Swarup and is the Purusha. Quote, you, unquote, is of three types. Other Purushas, unconscious things, and a special Purusha called Ishvara. But it's actually only one Ishvara. It's one entity. But according to the Maya coverings, it thinks itself separate. When ignorance is gone, because there is no variety, Ishvara does not exist. What to speak of a jiva being dependent on Ishvara? What to speak of fearing him? What to speak of being dependent on others? Paragraph. The proposition that the universe, which is dissimilar, does not exist at any time, and that knowledge does not eternally exist, are refuted by the two ideas explained, since they show the creation and destruction of upadhis and non-destruction of knowledge. He's way up there, Jiva Goswami. And now we're going to read his reference to this verse. That was just exclusively commenting on this one verse, text 33. Here's Paramatma Sandarbha. The Paramatma Sandarbha deals with understanding how the Paramatma feature interacts with Prakriti, because that's what he does. He is the Ishvara of Prakriti. It's not describing the activities of Bhagavan, it's describing the activities of Paramatma, a less than complete picture of Bhagavan. So here's the discussion. It's Anuchhed 32 from Paramatma Sandarbha, text 1. Someone may say that it is only because of the influence of the false ego that one thinks there are many different souls, each the witness of a particular field of activities. This mistaken idea is refuted by the Lord himself in a passage of Srimad Bhagavatam that begins with these words. Now it's Uddhava Gita, chapter 13. This is still chapter 10. Translation. To Uddhava. If your question assumes that all variety is ultimately an illusion, then how can such a question be at all meaningful? Oh, Brahmanas, what is the truth about you and about me, who am now speaking to you? Here, Lord Hamsadev, so Krishna is referring to a discussion. There's a position where Hamsa, the swan form of the Lord, is instructing the four Kumaras. And this is Krishna is referring to that discussion between the Hamsa avatar and the Kumaras. Here, Lord Hamsadev refers to the materialistic idea of the impersonalist gurus who claim that all individual souls are one and there is no true difference between them. Lord Hamsadev rejects this idea and instead explains that the spirit souls, who are part and parcel of the Lord, are distinct individuals. He then says, the next verse, if your question, who are you, referred to the material body made of 5 elements, elements that are in truth all alike, then your question was only a meaningless collection of words. Commentary, text 5. Therefore, even though they are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual spirit souls are individual, distinct persons, different from the Lord and from each other. That's Madhvacharya's teaching, Dvaitavad. Living entities different from other living entities different from the Lord. He's supporting. The Bhagavatam is supporting. The Lord describes the individual souls in these words of Bhagavad Gita 5:18 and 19. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, or outcast. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Text 6. Here the word Brahma, or Brahman, indicates the spiritual nature of the individual soul, that the individual soul is spiritual and transcendental, is described in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.27. This is Narada speaking to Vyas about his previous life, 1.5.27. As my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle material coverings, for both the Lord and I am transcendental. Commentary continues. There's only a short portion left. Here the word Mayi Brahmani means the soul that resides in the material body. Pare Brahmani means he who is the soul of the entire universe, that para Brahmani. So Mayi Brahmani, Pare Brahmani, and Sad Asat means cause and effect. So now we've this morning we've heard 3 different meanings of Sad and Asat. Cause and effect, good and bad, eternal, temporary. The temporary is an effect of the eternal. Asat is the effect of Sat. In this way, the individual spirit soul, who is called the Jiva Maya, or the potency that is the individual soul, resides in the material body. Paragraph. Jiva Goswami writes, here Narada is saying, quote, I am such an individual soul. As the individual spirit soul resides in a particular body, in the same way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the controller of the entire universe, also resides in the bodies of Indrachandra and all others. Kalpitam. Again, this is the verse Narada speaking to Vyas. Kalpitam here means with this understanding. Yaya means with this idea. And Pashye means I see. In this way, in the previous statements of this book, Paramatma Sandarbha, and in many other places also in the scriptures, it is seen that the nature of the individual souls is in many ways like the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. That is why in some places the scriptures declare, quote, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like that. I am like that, and you are also like that. Tattvamasi. That all spirit souls have the same kind of spiritual nature is also confirmed by these words in this morning's verse. And I read this and we're done. His translation for this morning's verse. As long as one thinks the different modes of material nature create different kinds of souls, one will think that the souls have many different kinds of natures. As long as one thinks the souls have many different kinds of natures, one will remain in the grip of material illusion. Interesting, huh? Very interesting. Really interesting. There are two philosophies that I'm aware of that say there's different kinds of souls. One is Madhva's teachings, and another is the Jewish faith. At least I've been told. The Jewish faith thinks there's chosen souls, and others are not. And you can become Jewish, but you can't become a chosen soul Jewish, because those souls are different. There's, Hebrew words for it. And it's a very surprising understanding. In Madhvacharya's teachings, there's the Nava Prameyas, or 9. There's the Pramana, the evidence, and there's that which is known by the Pramana, that's the Prameyas. And one of his is the living entities are different. And he takes it to this extreme. You can't become other than what you are as a soul. It's a very interesting concept. There's details. So let's go to, can you fix the focus? The focus is really fuzzy. Okay. So this is the verse. As long as the living entity thinks that the modes of material nature have separate existences, he will be obliged to take birth in many different forms and will experience varieties of material existence. Therefore, the living entity remains completely dependent on fruitive activities and under the modes of nature. So we also heard this idea that said not only the modes have separate existence, but the living entity is but a product of those modes. Living entity is not a product of the modes, but that's a material conception that some people think. So that's a different idea than what you were seeing on the screen here, or what we heard several times, the translation. There's a different translation or understanding. And the other understanding is Prakriti has its own existence, and it's separate from Ishvara. So you don't really need, it's a karma mimamsa idea. Prakriti exists with modes making up that Prakriti, and thinking in that separatist way, then where it will perpetuate material existence. And in the perpetuation of material existence, one will engage in fruitive activities according to the influence of the modes to try to be enjoyers, and trying to be the enjoyers of fruitive activities, whatever the mode is, even the mode of goodness. That's what we heard previously in this chapter. It takes you up to a heavenly planet, but it's the same conditioning program. Temporary, illusory, and depleted. One will be forced as long as one thinks separate. So how do you go about changing the dial? So you're not thinking Prakriti and the modes of Prakriti have any separate existence. Well, knowledge of what's behind Prakriti and what's behind the modes. When one turns attention away from the Supreme, who's behind Prakriti, then you don't see him. You see Prakriti and think that's it. That's it. That's reality. Like, here we are. We're in the living room and several of us seated together and this and that and the other thing. And that's reality. We're not conscious of a higher reality as we're sitting here in the room. And knowledge says, well, yes, we're sitting in the room. It's not false, but it's temporary. And there's a higher reality. And let us conduct our activities trying to connect with that higher reality and seeing the temporary things that are meant to be used in the service. This is bhakti understanding of that higher reality, or the Supreme, or Bhagavan, or God, or the Source, or Krishna, or whatever. Rendering service to that which is beyond the senses to perceive. For those that are very fortunate and the Supreme Lord reveals himself to them, they don't see with their material senses, they see with spiritual senses, and that's the Lord's prerogative, to reveal himself to others. So what if he doesn't reveal himself to us? At least according to our conscious perception. Just like, the deity form of the Lord. He is revealing himself. And, some persons will think this way and some persons will think that way about the deity form of the Lord. But those that are Krishna conscious, they'll see this is the Lord manifesting in a very charming form. That even my material senses can perceive, but we won't perceive the spiritual form of the Lord with material senses, unless through purification and devotion and knowledge. And then we can see, at least to some degree we can see. So let's see if there's some discussion on this morning's verse, text 31. 32, excuse me.
Sorry, Mara. So, just a quick question. So we also know that Prakriti is separated energy from Krishna, which is strong, which is inferior to the marginal energy, which are the souls. But still, it is so strong, right? Right? So I was just kind of.
You're just what?
Kind of relating it how we are being a marginal energy, which we are not much stronger than the Prakriti.
This is a comment or a reflection. It's not a question. It's fine.
Okay. So can I maybe make it into a question like, so after this more detail that we talked about these connections, so how we can with the, so this Prakriti is stronger than the marginal energy, that's the idea I'm getting. So
not exactly. The marginal energy is stronger, but the strength of that marginal energy is when the attention is of the marginal energy is directed towards the Supreme Person. And when the living entity desires to forgetfulness, that's reciprocated with by the Supreme Lord, who obliges living entity's desire by covering the living entity with the marginal potency. It's not that the marginal potency is stronger. It's the Lord is stronger and he reciprocates.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Over here.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Like we have so much faith in this mode of nature or in this material worlds. Somehow I'm observing that consciously there is some, observing or just seeing that how interesting things are happening around. But subconsciously there's a deep attachment still pulls. And I fear time to time that while leaving the body, those subconscious attachment, which I feel I don't have a control right now, will take over, and I will go with that thought.
That's usual. So now what to do? It has everything to do with our process of chanting. And that, as with the process with chanting, so also with the process of leaving, it's not only an effort, but it's a dependence on mercy. To practice, according to Gaudiya Vaishnava, Lord Chaitanya's teachings, there's effort and mercy required. And effort alone is insufficient. Because yes, it's not just that, subconscious, it's the whole material program has got us in her grip. It's not necessary, but it is the situation. And so strive as we may to achieve connection. We've all experienced, and it's like, it's one of those common questions. We go up and then we don't stay very long. We go back to the conditioned state. What to do? It's the same question. Like, that we were saying last time I was visiting in Naperville. It's the I'm Not There Yet Club. I know, and then very quickly it goes back to where I was before, or close to where I was before. Don't seem to be making much progress. I'm not there yet. I have faith, and I practice, and I get some insight, but I don't stay there. Very quickly, it goes back to the conditioned consciousness and way of moving through the world and living my life. It's the same territory for all of us conditioned souls practicing bhakti incompletely. So what to do? It's a different version of your question, but it's essentially the same question. We're under the grip. What to do? So we continue to make effort and we call for mercy. And those who we call for mercy from are those who we have faith in, our spiritual masters and our previous acharyas and elevated personalities. That principle moves one, leverages one progressively into the stage of Raganuga Bhakti, where it's spontaneous. But it doesn't come without cultivation. That there are persons who are perfected, and we look to those perfected souls not to imitate, but to take inspiration from and receive mercy from. That's where Lord Chaitanya's if what to speak of get out of the clutches of our conditioning, to go to Goloka Vrindavan, that's a requirement. Say it negatively, one will not go to Krishna Loka unless that form of bhakti becomes our way of life. So we have some distance to go. That's okay. The mercy is very strong, and the givers of mercy are more than willing to give the mercy, but they don't impose it. Well, why don't they impose it? They know that we're struggling and they're compassionate, so why don't they just like clunk us over the head and take away our free will and force us to be submissive? It's not the way it works. It's a voluntary calling out. So that's what to do. For the present situation leading up to the moment of death, which is your question, let those impressions and tendencies be gradually mitigated and dismissed by your effort and by ample descending mercy that's available. Anything else? Anything online? Yes. Okay.
This is from Yamuna Mai Devidasi. Maharaj, Hamsa avatar has a relation with Kumara Sampradaya. Can you please elaborate it? How did the knowledge was passed in that lineage?
The lineage of the Kumara Sampradaya starts with Sankarshan. Now the Kumaras are in various places, but the Sampradaya starts with Sankarshan. So Hansa Avatar also appears and gives them transcendental knowledge. But the Sampradaya starts with Lord Sankarshan.
Okay. So the next question is from Radharani Bhattacharya. Krishna says Binna Prakriti Astaka in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7. So what is Krishna intending to say different than this verse of Uddhava Gita?
It's not different. It's just a deeper, more elaborate explanation of that reference from Bhagavad Gita. Like, how does it work? What's the technology of it? What's the cause and effect, or the push and pull of the three modes of material nature conditioning living entities? I mean, it's not everything that there is there to be said, but the distinction is, it's just further elaboration on the principle.
Okay, Maharaj. This is from Govinda Mohini Devidasi. Maharaj, this is from our reading group members. Is Brahma Bhuta stage described in chapter 18 Bhagavad Gita and reaching Samadhi mentioned in chapter 6, are they the same or different realization?
They're different. They're related, but they're different. The Brahma Bhuta stage is preliminary. Preliminary meaning, I understand I am spirit soul, that's who I am. You can say, I'm not the coverings of the soul. It's a preliminary understanding. And this other, chapter 6 Bhagavad Gita, is more complete. The attention is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead in trance. It's more complete.
This question is from Girivara Dari Das Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj, how can we explain existence of super
How can
soul?
we do what?
Explain.
Explain.
Yeah. Existence of super soul in living beings to someone who is new to devotional service. Soul can be explained as conscious? That is question.
Well, it can be explained on the strength of higher authority, scriptural authority. We won't be able to understand the all-pervasive feature of the Supreme without scriptural authority. It can be explained in reasonable terms, just like, how do we explain the existence of the soul to a person that's an atheist? So supposing somebody's a theist, how do you explain the super soul? Well, this Supreme Person is very loving, and when living entities turn away from him, he still stays with them because of his lovingness, his quality of being loving, and he accompanies the living entity in their sojourn of forgetfulness in a concealed manner within the heart. He's side by side with the soul, but they cannot see him. And that's his compassionate nature. And he's guiding and directing their activities, and they're not paying attention. So therefore, he's making arrangements for their other activities. It's just the loving nature of the Supreme Person, hiding himself because we're not wanting him. We're wanting to be enjoyers. So that's, it depends on the person, whether they're going to accept that or understand that or smile or, look at you with a funny look. How people respond is going to depend upon their piety. But that's how you can explain.
Thank you, Maharaj. This is from Snehavalli Devidasi Mataji. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I would like clarification on 3 points. First, in Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's purport, he mentioned worship of 5 demigods for the fulfillment of material desires. Sorry.
So she wants further explanation of that?
I was moving this.
Okay.
Which 5 demigods is he referring to?
He's referring to the 5 demigods that are popular, that Adi Shankara makes reference to.
Secondly, I'm curious to know 4 Kumaras heard from Lord Shankarshan, Hamsa Avatar. Is this after they become devotees of the personal future of the Lord, or when they were Brahmavadis? That's a second.
I'm not sure what her question is, but they became Vaishnavas, or devotees of the Lord, in Vaikuntha. But the details of the Vedic wisdom came from Sankarshan. They heard from Sankarshan the details, but they became devotees right in Vaikuntha.
So you want me to repeat the second question, Maharaja?
No, that's it. That's my answer.
Okay. Third, I am curious to know difference between 2 different types of souls mentioned in Madhvacharya's philosophy.
Yeah, it's complicated.
And 4,000 types of human species mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Is there a connection there?
Yes, but it's too complicated to explain right now. Snehavalli, I'll refer you to a place where you can get the detail, and you'll be a little puzzled because it's not what we're used to hearing, but it's detailed very clearly. And I'll send you the reference.
This last question is from, there is no name. Would it be okay to ask general questions not related to the topic?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
If so, I'm curious to learn Maharaj's view on natural farming.
Natural what?
Farming, agricultural farming.
Farming?
Yeah.
Okay.
No tilling, weed removal, pesticide, unnecessary effort, etc. That your views on natural farming.
It's a no-brainer. I mean, there's consequences for these artificial as opposed to natural methods. And so, preferable or ideal is without the artificial methods of pesticides and so forth. And whatever it means, the crops may get eaten by pests or something like that. You deal with it, but you don't do pesticides. And, the natural course of agriculture is Vedic, you know, there were pests or insects or whatever, diseases that would blight a crop. That happened during Vedic times, presumably. But you know that you abide by nature's way, and you're going long term. You're going to get the best result because it's pleasing to the personality of Godhead and not murderous. And there's consequences for that, for the other. Okay, that's it. Something more?
This question is from Vijeshwari Pran Mataji.
From?
Vijeshwari Pran.
Okay.
Mataji is asking that could you please kindly explain on Jiva Goswami Karma Sandarbha statement that as long as variety exists, Atma will be dependent on karma.
As long as variety exists, Atma will be dependent on karma. Well, it's just another way of saying the same thing that was said in a different way. That, you know, it's this feeling oneself dependent upon Prakriti, which means the modes of nature. Then, in that sense of dependence upon Prakriti as the modes of nature, one is going to do fruitive work according to the modes of nature to try to experience fulfillment or happiness. It's just, you know, and both are the default arrangement or consequence of ignoring Krishna. You ignore Krishna, there's another reality. What's the other reality? It's Prakriti. With Prakriti comes modes of nature. With Prakriti and modes of nature comes fruitive activity. Because that's reality, and there isn't anything else. Srila Prabhupada ki